It has been a set book for literature in Tanzania here for a number of years. It is called Luanda Magere. And that book, I wrote it because one of my teachers was from Holland, Father Grot. He was a very, very racist man. He could say all negative things about black people. One of the things he said is that black people were not created with the capacity to understand the metaphysical. We could dance well, we could do it, and even within the physical realm, a concept like a million was not available to black people because the average herd size was about 25 animals, and they could count very well up to 100, but beyond 100, they got into problems. So I remembered my grandmother had told me a story about Luanda Magere. And when I looked at the story and what this guy was discussing, I just felt like it was one and the same thing. The question of free will and predestination was contained in this small Luo story of this man who had a body of a rock, and the only way you could kill him was by striking at his shadow. And I saw themes of metaphysics there. So I wrote this play as a protest to my teacher, and I gave him and I said, here is evidence that in Africa we also dealt with metaphysics from looking at folklore. So these small things have come, and that's how I began my protest. And the foundation of my protest is the gospel of Christ. When in Acts 1:8 he says, go and be my witnesses. So in my activism, I do my apostolate. I'm Catholic. I do my apostolate. I do my witnessing. Not to hate the enemy, but to love the enemy. Not to crush the enemy, but to convert the enemy. And I do it for conviction, not for cash. For prophecy, not for profits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Omtata. It's really a story. I'd like to invite Sarah to tell us about her journeys in Uganda, as well as a country that claims to be the Pearl of Africa. But remember, we are in the warm heart of Africa.
Thank you very much. I greet you all. I'm Sarah Nambuya. Currently, I'm an independent OD consultant. I've been in this practice for a minimum of 12 years. I'm one of the graduates of the FOD at ISAN, and I'm an ISAN associate, and among the members of the founding members of Apodia, and I'm very glad to be that. I'm also a mother of a boy who is 8 years, and I'm bringing him up that one day he'll be a vibrant leader of Africa. So that is part of my activism. I also do a voluntary work if I find that an institution is in need of my services and I have the time, and it can make a difference with them. Now, I find myself, having listened to my two colleagues, that my weaponry is much softer. It's not the chain, not the gun. I am an advocate who, I think, who is very feminist. I talk to people, I encourage them during the interventions of organizational development that I engage them with, to take courage and complete the battles. In many cases, I find these organizations, they are scared, they are not even conscious of the power they have in the whole engagement, in what they do. Some of them feel they are browbeaten by their donors. Some of them feel it is the board. Sometimes the board feels it is the management. And sometimes it's interesting, even in an organization, you may find that the entire organization is on the fingertips of a driver. Believe you me, there are plenty of stories. So I find that I go on in there to raise consciousness of, first of all, what ought to be and what is. And together we work on what should, how they can close the gap and take the courage and put the things in right perspectives. There have been instances where there has been corruption. I'm an ardent member of my church, and even in other churches, even in other institutions, church-founded institutions I've worked with, corruption is not a visitor. You know, you even get very shocked, but together I have gone in there and worked with them, and they have come to realize that they need to stop this thing. Behind certain institutions are sort of nightlives. And these nightlives are actually very well guarded. And if you try to touch them, you know, you would go down. I mean, you would be immediately rejected. But I've found that I've got the ability, because of being an OD practitioner, to get into there and actually work with church-founded organization to open the closets. And together we can examine the skeletons and see what, and then I ask them what they would like to do with the skeleton. And slowly by slowly, they begin putting back the flesh. And it, you know, in one case, the staff really resented their leader, this was a church-founded organization. They thought all their problems were found in this church leader. Oh, this person talks to the bishop. Oh, this person he does not even understand what we do. You see, with us, we know the development work. The other person knows the religious, so he does not know what to do. But when we went through this whole process, believe you me, what came out was very surprising to even the accusers themselves. They found that they were actually part of the plot. And having spoken to the person, the religious leader who was being accused, he was very confused. He did not even understand the whole resistance. And so within there, although it is a religious institution, and you might assume that it is the religious leaders with the power, actually the non-religious can be more powerful and can even overthrow and topple the organization, but they will leave, like there is a saying in my language that, you know, that the person who has eaten the meat can come and rub the soup on your mouth, and then everybody think you are the one who has stolen the meat. Yes, I have even worked in an institution which was an intermediary institution, where I have found that this is a donor institution, but it was being driven and dictated by a driver. He was determining everything. It didn't matter whatever books you had. It didn't matter whatever plans were written, even back home, because this was an affiliated organization. But all the dynamics were around how this driver felt, what he liked and what he did not like. Some people went out because he didn't like them. Some people stayed even though they were not worth it because he stayed in there. And now, you know, I find it very frightening sometimes to walk in there. Unlike my colleague who is forever courageous, I work with fear. Because at times you enter there and you even want to stop, you want to run, but again you cannot, because you need to bring the battle to a close. And these are the issues you have to begin working with, and you can imagine how you begin presenting such an issue to the topmost person, you know. And it can really be very interesting, very frustrating at the same time. So I think I work with fear, and that fear drives me. And then in another case, I find that I have to work, say, with government officials in informal spaces. Say I'm invited, recently I was invited to moderate a process where the government was coming out to mobilize, so to speak, a civil society kind of organization, such that it could, work with it and coordinate the work that goes on in the civil society. But during that interaction, I could see the government officials were so fed up of the public, They were so fed up because for a long time, they have been called names. The institutions of government have been called names. And so the individuals inside are seeping in that negativity, are seeping in that resentment, such that now when they are being asked by certain policies to actually carry out an activity and they must face the public and actually organize them and think of a productive way of working with them, they can't help but, And then on the other side, what I think I halfway expected that, but when the representatives of the various NGOs and the CBOs were asked to talk about themselves, immediately they just went into a conflict and accusation. They were looking for positions, and then in trying, it seemed to be like it was an informal invitation to come and campaign for space. And in there, they start then pointing fingers to each other and showing that the leaders among the NGOs and CBOs are not good enough. They started talking about the dirty powers they had. Some of them only recruited members into their organizations only if you were going to be quiet and allow them to do what they want. Yes, such as, yes, if you were willing that you would allow the leader, whenever you went out to make money, the leader would take the lion's share, including your personal share, then you would belong to that group. Okay. And even be quiet and even not talk about it and not even challenge that leader. And actually, in most cases, they tended to be the men. Yes, and in one case, yes, one of them, some of them talked about how the men were actually, with all due respect, asking for the females to extend even free access to their bodies in order for them to stay. Yeah. So, and then you enter in there and then you are so paralyzed and you cannot believe it. Some of them have been leaders for 10 years, for 20 years. They are renowned names. You just don't understand why a person who has built such a long CV needs to do that in order to sustain power. But that is the world. Okay. And now you have to go and figure out, how do you enter in there? Not only perhaps to make sure that you have an opportunity to talk about how the women should be empowered, but also how all this needs to be fused together to enable the organization to be more effective, to produce the true impact it should do, to be more accountable to its constituency than it is. And that keeps me moving. And I think that is what sometimes inspires me if I find that I sometimes work, say, with a CBO, and it can only afford so much. At times I've gone and extended voluntary work with them if they see it fit as well. Yeah, such that, yes, I mean, sometimes, yes, I need to live, I need to work, I need to be paid. But sometimes I think the people who pay me need me less than those who cannot afford me. And so sometimes that's why I go into there. So I find that literally half the time I work to be paid, and the other half of my time I volunteer my services to those who really need me. And sometimes it's with organizations, sometimes it is on a mentoring basis, on a one-to-one. And that keeps me moving. And that is my struggle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You'll have to agree that there are different angles to this conversation. And Alilea has a conversation regarding elections. She has a story regarding elections that would be unfair for her not to share with us.
Thank you. You know, I thought at first we are just introducing ourselves to say what we are. Thank you. The Tanzania Media Women's Association usually put up plans and strategies. I mean, how they are planned to achieve some few things, maybe over 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. And we developed a strategic plan 2009, which ran to 2014. And one of our strategy was that we promote the visibility of women in decision making by increasing the number of women in political position. But again, another strategy to fight corruption in all forms. Now, last year, 2010, Tamwa had a lot of things to do to make sure that we achieve that goal of increasing the number of women in political decision making and fighting corruption, and specifically in elections. And we had planned some activities. So we planned some of our activity because we are media people. We use media to get out information. So we had TV spot and radio spot messages, and we had press statements and radio shows. In TV and radio spots, we had designed a very strategic information which actually meant to empower the public to realize the negative effect of corruption in election, and to empower them to take action to do away with the corruption in election. And this message would be put on air in radio and TV, including prime time of news bulletins. And it will go like this. For example, it will say, mtu yoyote anayetoa rushwa, hata